Boy, I have been gone a while, haven't I? Well, I'm back. We're rocking a new season, and why not bring something new to the table? This week's episode is a new part of the channel I call Breakdown, where we're normally pulling from examples from all of pop culture. Today we're going to be zeroing in and dissecting one story in particular to examine the effect of theme on your story. So strap in, it's going to be a wild ride. I'm author DC Ferguson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. Now, before we get started, what the heck kept me away so long? Well, that would be this gorgeous beauty right here. The final book in the Dragon's Dream saga is out on Amazon in ebook and paperback. Read the entire series, from the pulse-pounding start to the heart-stopping finish. Without a doubt, this was the most amazing series to write, and I'm really going to miss writing Cora Blake. So, what are you waiting for? Get started with Book 1, Project Phoenix. The link is in the description box down below. So, in today's breakdown, we have a really amazing example. Even if you've never seen this film or don't like it, the lessons we get to mine out of it are astonishing. So, without further ado, let's talk about the 1986 musical comedy Little Shop of Horrors, based on both a 1960 film and a Broadway musical of the same name. Now, this part is really important to understand the lesson here, and that's the progression of this film, so listen up. Our first iteration of the movie was a throwaway film made for drive-ins by B-movie horror director Roger Corman. Made on a shoestring budget and largely reusing sets and props from a previous film, Corman made The Little Shop of Horrors based on a 1956 short story called The Reluctant Orchid. Always intended to be a comedic horror film, it had laughs and a plant that eats people. The film that focuses on a poor florist, his name is Seymour Krelboyne, and he works for a failing flower shop owned by Gravis Mushnick. Seymour is in love with his coworker Audrey, but he's too meek to say anything. Seymour finds a plant he calls Audrey Jr., a plant so exotic it starts drawing attention from around the neighborhood. He finds out that this strange plant feeds on human blood. As Audrey Jr. grows larger, feeding droplets from his finger isn't enough anymore. After accidentally causing a man to die, Seymour tries to dispose of the body and ends up feeding it to Audrey Jr. Mushnick sees what Seymour did and threatens to expose him. Suffering from a toothache, Seymour goes to a sadistic dentist named Dr. Farb. When the dentist attacks him, Seymour stabs and kills him, feeding him to Audrey Jr. as well. Mr. Mushnick feeds a robber to him, and later, Seymour is hypnotized by the talking Audrey Jr. and forced to bring in another victim. In the end, with cops on his tail, Seymour returns to the flower shop to kill Audrey Jr., and in the final scene, Audrey Jr. is withering, and flower buds open with each of the faces of every victim in the flowers. And the final face is that of Seymour saying, "I didn't mean it." Now, that's a whole lot of murder for comedy, but it is a farce. Now, when we get to the Broadway musical in a moment, you're going to see how the story was streamlined from its B-movie origins, but the thing about this film was that it was a runaway hit. Teens going to the drive-in movie theaters in 1960 to see the film Black Sunday got an extra treat, and the movie developed a cult following. The following year, it was released to pair with The Last Woman on Earth, and it got a lot of good word of mouth once more, with a cameo from a very, very young Jack Nicholson, and the lighthearted approach to all the death and murder. Critics loved the film. So, it did very well, and it moved to late-night broadcasting in the 60s and 70s. Somehow, someone got it in their head to do this film as a stage musical, and that brings us ever closer to our film. In this case, that title card is really, really accurate. The play is the thing that will end up inspiring our movie. Released in 1982, the stage show went on to Broadway to critical acclaim. No longer taking place in Roger Corman's California Skid Row, it now took place in Skid Row, New York, because Broadway. The mood and the world building is done through catchy songs inspired by 60s Motown sounds. And as for the story, well, we've changed quite a few things. Seymour Krelboyne is now an orphan that's been under the care of Mushnick. He's also still infatuated with Audrey, but now she's dating the sadistic and abusive dentist, whose name is now Orin Scrivello. The cops that were chasing Seymour has been dropped as a subplot entirely, and the plant, now called Audrey 2, is from outer space. Yes, Audrey 2, that blood sucking, person eating plant, is a space alien. Now, what's important to understand is that while we've dropped or toned down some of the murder at Seymour's hands, the theme is still the same between the movie and the Broadway show. The theme centers around greed. There's Audrey 2's greed for blood. There's Mushnick looking the other way after he knows Seymour fed the dentist to Audrey 2 because his shop is doing well, so he just looks the other way. And then there's Seymour himself. In over his head with the man-eating plant, all he wants is Audrey, but his path is without any morality. After the dentist accidentally kills himself with his own laughing gas backpack, Seymour feeds him to Audrey 2, and then Mushnick blackmails him over it to steal Audrey 2, and Seymour tricks Mushnick into getting eaten by Audrey 2. In the end, Audrey finds herself alone with the plant, and she gets eaten. In a rage, Seymour tries to kill Audrey 2, and he gets eaten too. The ending has little Audrey 2 sprouting up all over the audience, growing all over America as the latest craze, dooming us to be invaded by man-eating plants. Now, only 4 short years later, this blockbuster Broadway show will be made into a big-budget Hollywood movie. They take the exact same story, all of the songs and characters, and only make subtle tweaks to the plot. During test screenings, everyone hated the ending. So what changed? This is where we dig into the nitty-gritty and learn exactly how much theme impacts your storytelling. So, let's discuss. I am not kidding when I say this. Almost 50% of the movie's budget for Little Shop of Horrors was used on the ending of the film, and it all got scrapped. Featuring a giant Audrey 2 laying waste to entire cities, it was a full realization of the ending featured in the stage play. The whole ending had to be scrapped in favor of a happy ending. So why did audiences turn against this? How could such a popular and well-received show require a complete change from the ending of the original film and the Broadway play? Well, the first step is agency. Our Seymour is played by Rick Moranis, at the time riding a high of being the go-to nerd in Hollywood after the runaway success of Ghostbusters. He made the perfect Seymour, a down-on-his-luck schlep in Skid Row, just trying to be with the girl of his dreams and make it out of the ghetto. Believe it or not, this was part of the problem. Unable to find an actress that even came close to the Broadway show's performance of Audrey, they just went ahead and cast Ellen Greene from it to reprise her role as a lispy, naive, abused woman that believes that she deserves what she gets from Orin Scrivello and doesn't imagine getting to be with a good guy like Seymour. Yeah, that's right. If you're already starting to see a love story blooming, you're on the right track. Now, our dentist is what starts our descent into this bad review of the original ending. Played by the bona fide best jerk in comedy, Steve Martin takes on the role of hurting children and slapping Audrey around. He's funny, he's having fun in the role, and you love to hate him. Now, it's so key to understand this. When Seymour goes to see him, Audrey 2 has convinced Seymour that killing Orin will save Audrey and feed Audrey 2. It's win-win. But when Seymour goes to the dentist's office to do the deed, he can't. Instead, Orin ends up killing himself with his laughing gas backpack. Likewise, when Seymour feeds Mushnick to Audrey 2, Mushnick's greed is on full display here. He's pointing a gun at Seymour, he's blackmailing him to take everything away. All Seymour does is convince Mushnick to put his head inside Audrey 2's mouth, but Audrey's the one that does the killing. So, what does that do as a storytelling device? Well, let's start with that question because it's vital to our understanding. Seymour has absolutely no blood on his hands. Yes, everything that he's doing is morally wrong, but he hasn't committed this cardinal sin of murder. So we as an audience can still sympathize with him. We can still hope that he comes to his senses and redeems himself. Rick Moranis as Seymour is short, sweet, lovable, and naturally appeals to us as an audience as someone to root for. The next part is the greed element of the play and the original movie. It's all but absent in this film from Seymour's motivations. Even when he's brought on the radio show, even when Mushnick's flower shop is doing the best it ever had, we see Seymour in the basement looking glum while he's feeding Audrey 2 his own blood. Seymour never comes off as greedy, he comes off as love-struck. And so we go into the next problem. The wonderful song Somewhere That's Green is Audrey's dream of a life far away from Skid Row, in the suburbs with a front lawn and a family. In her dream, she dares to picture Seymour as the husband, even as she thinks she doesn't deserve someone so kind and thoughtful. Her dream, especially in 1986, is an idealized version of the American dream. Now, patriotism is running arguably the highest it ever had been at the time, so this is also a timing problem. So, if greed isn't our theme anymore, what is? Well, as I mentioned, and you may have guessed, it's love and the American dream. Two people, down on their luck in the ghettos, find each other, find love, and the hope that they can run away from their upbringing and make a life for themselves with a white picket fence and 2.5 children. But before our star-crossed lovers here can get off the ground, Audrey 2 kills them both and takes over the world. You see the problem? The truth is, changing the theme of this movie from greed to the American dream doomed the ending to failure. So, let's go another level deeper, into some of the lessons that we've learned on the Worldbuilding Dojo and see how this happened. Your theme, as we've discussed in this video, is usually a single phrase description of the concept underpinning your whole story. With my series, for example, the Dragon's Dream saga features a battle between our protagonist Cora Blake and our antagonist Lucius, but the theme of the whole series is fighting fate. Are these two doomed to kill each other because it was written in the stars, or can they find agency to change the path they were given? That's a theme. With Little Shop of Horrors, Seymour never had his hands totally clean, not in the play or the original movie. In the play, when he set his sights on Audrey and saw her within his reach, nothing would stop him, not even murder. In the movie, the same thing happened, but he didn't go into anything particularly evil to get there. This speaks to the larger influence that theme can have on a movie. Instead of Audrey 2 becoming the personification of a growing evil that Seymour fed into to serve his own ends, eventually consuming him and everything he loves, as greed often does, we have a total change in the movie. Our focus is now Seymour and Audrey's love for each other and the hope for a future together. Audrey 2 becomes an antagonist, standing in the way of their dream. The plant is now an enemy to be defeated. By changing the theme of the story, we fundamentally changed the symbolic meaning of Audrey 2 as a character. It isn't all of Seymour's misdeeds come back to haunt him and dooming the whole world because of his greed. Now, for us to achieve happiness, we have to reject Audrey 2 and destroy it, freeing ourselves to have the protagonist live their dreams. This was a simple mistake that cost the filmmakers literally half the film's budget. Already shot and available on the director's cut of the movie, the ending is basically finished, but was completely scrapped after audiences turned on it. They went back, they did reshoots, and now Seymour and Audrey defeat Audrey 2 and go on to live their happy life in the suburbs. The ending makes the film charming, while the play's negative kill all humans outcome is still appropriate for it, because the focus on the greed aspect and this one florist has doomed us all is completely in line with what it was already doing. The plays end on a funny note, while still being a morality play. The film version is clearly a love story. Is one better than the other? Well, depends on who you ask. The truth is, they're both doing a really great job of serving their stories. The outcome of the final act is exactly what it should be for each of them, based on the theme pervading through the two narratives. What's really amazing to me, as I was watching this film for like the 20th time since I was a kid, in preparation for this episode, is just how remarkably well this movie holds up. It's available for free on HBO Max if you have that streaming service. I strongly recommend watching it. It's funny, it's charming, it has an awesome soundtrack. And for a guy that really doesn't care much for musicals, this is without a doubt my favorite one. When watching it though, look for all the little cues in the writing. The way that Seymour is made a sympathetic character. The way his misdeeds are made to be incidental or accidental to keep his hands clean. The way Steve Martin's dentist dials up the jerk to 11 so he's so over the top that it's hilarious. We're glad when he's dead. We don't blame Seymour. Look at the way that Audrey is made to be the sweetest, most innocent, and sympathetic character. These are the types of things that you should be looking out for, and it's amazing how well they're done. I know what you're saying, though. But, DC, what does this all mean for me? Well, let me tell you, guy who talks to your monitor. It means a lot. Let's discuss. There are some real meaty lessons here about genre expectation, too. The old saying, if it walks, talks, and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, that can never be more apparent than this particular example of film history. The original film and the musical that followed are morality plays. The 1986 film is a love story through and through. All three of them use horror and comedy to their benefit, but one of these isn't like the others. With a love story, there is a genre expectation that there will be a happily ever after. With a morality play, we expect tragedy. We didn't even fundamentally change the story or the dialogue. All we did was just alter the focus. Some iconography, like the green grass and the picket fence in Audrey's dream, keep Seymour's hands clean from guilt. Cast two likable, hopeless romantics that have great chemistry, and we absolutely changed the entire tempo of the film. What worked in a tragedy doesn't work in a love story, because we've changed genres and our expectations go along with it. Take, for example, the films Interstellar and Ad Astra. Both of them claim to be hard science fiction, that is, adhering to the high standards of scientific accuracy in the narrative and the world building. Both of them tell very human stories within that world, with Interstellar about a man's relationship with his daughter, and Ad Astra, a man's relationship with his father. Both of them go on doomed quests to accomplish their goals. Interstellar, even if in its climax, sticks real tight to the rules of the road of hard science fiction, and we have a very bittersweet ending as a result. Ad Astra decides to give up science in the third act to tell the story it wants to tell, no matter how contrived it plays out. So, Interstellar comes out, good reviews, audience reaction is blown away by the heavy concepts. Ad Astra, absolute trash with an unlikable main character and goofy, made-up science fantasy in the third act. If the theme of the story you're trying to tell fits the genre expectation, then it is on you to either live up to it or dare to defy it. Understand, however, romantic comedies always have a happy ending because comedy isn't tragedy. Romeo and Juliet, contrary to what your high school teacher may have thought, is not a love story. It is a tragedy, and the focus is less on the romance and much more about the cost of this war between these two houses. The distinction is subtle, but it's there. And as we saw today with Little Shop of Horrors, such a small shift in theme can dramatically change the expected outcome of your work. Theme does not play a critical role in your story, but it can have a pivotal role in how it plays out and how it feels to your intended audience. Be mindful that the story you're trying to tell is in keeping with genre expectations you've put the story in. All things in their place. I hope you enjoyed this week's breakdown. We'll be doing a lot more of these in the future, trying to look at the nuts and bolts of how a story is told in our world. Now, my summer has been pretty awesome, between you guys, writing my newest book, and spending time with this beautiful lady. Her name is Liana. She's now 12 and on the spectrum. We're working with the Boston-based Needs organization to get this little lady a service dog. If you'd like to help, check out the link in the description box down below. Also, while you're down there, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. The link is also in the comments, and you're going to get Cora Blake, Arcane Agent, totally free. You'll get cool news about what I'm working on in books and here on the channel, and it comes loaded with cool authors and promotions for fantasy and sci-fi. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and as always, I'm DC Ferguson. Now have fun and get crafting.